Hello, I'm Tony Walter, the opinion page editor of the Press-Gazette. I'm here today with Governor Scott Walker, who will be meeting later with the Press-Gazette's editorial board. Governor, welcome to Green Bay.
Good to be back.
A few questions. First one on the whole issue of jobs, which has been a major issue. We're getting so many seemingly conflicting reports. Bloomberg talked about where the state ranked. The labor statistics say jobs down, and yet we see unemployment going down. Can you clarify that for us as far as how do we believe?
Well, if you look March to March numbers, those are the numbers you sometimes hear talked about, and that's where the numbers were down in comparison to other states. And it's really, if you think about it logically, it's no great surprise. March, April, May of last year, a lot was happening at the Capitol, and I think for a lot of small businesses who need certainty to know if they're going to add jobs, there wasn't a whole lot of certainty going on. Things have quieted down, they've eased down. We've seen since the start of the year, for example, in the private sector, about 15,600 net new jobs in the state of Wisconsin. And as you mentioned, unemployment rate in the state's the lowest it's been since 2008 at 6.8%. So good signs for the future. Certainly in the last year we've had our ups and our downs and some challenges, but we've turned things around. And the best thing I look at are indicators for the future. Federal Reserve Bank in Philadelphia does projections state by state. Manpower out of Milwaukee does them state by state. All of those project that in the future we're going to add jobs. And a recent survey of employers showed that 87% say in this year alone they're going to add more jobs.
Are you telling us then that a year from now we should be seeing some pretty different statistics than we've seen?
I think dramatic. I think after June 5th. I think when you look at the surveys done, just the business climate. 2 years ago, statewide Chamber of Commerce did a survey. Only 10% of our employers thought we were heading in the right direction. Same survey conducted a couple months ago, started this year. 94% of our employers think we're heading in the right direction. But on that survey, they had an open-ended question and said, what's the biggest thing that keeps you from adding more jobs right now? Number one on that list were recalls. Employers like where we're headed, they like the turnaround, they like the better business environment for small businesses in particular, but they're still very, very concerned about what's going to happen in the recall. And I don't blame them. Look at what's happened in Illinois, and they see the absolute mess there, what it's done. Their unemployment rate's 8.8%, ours is 6.8%. I think once we get past June 5th, you're going to see a dynamic increase in the number of jobs.
Speaking of post-June 5th, with their obvious polarization, not only in the legislature but in the state on a lot of issues, is there any reason to believe that the two sides will find some common ground to begin to mend?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, remember this. Some people sometimes in the media act like this has never happened before. In 2000 and 2004, in the presidential election, we were the closest blue state in America. There was no more state evenly divided where Gore and Kerry won, where it was that close, 2.5 million votes, a couple thousand votes split the difference, and it was highly charged elections. I think for us, the best thing we can do is really, it's a choice. Do you want to go backwards or forwards? My opponents talk about wanting to go back in time and rehash the very debate that we had last year, the debate that I think for some created some uncertainty about the future. Now that things have quieted down, we're moving forward. We've had more than $1 billion worth of savings. Property taxes are down for the first time in 12 years. Businesses are feeling better about the future out there. The last thing anybody, or not anybody, most people, I should say, want to do is rehash that battle again. So my view is we can move forward. We've certainly learned a lot from the last year about how to do this and not just do it, but do it in a way that's constructive. And I think we're going to build off of that.
Paul Ryan has, as you know, indicated that this recall election is the second most important election in the nation. One, do you buy into that? But two, you obviously are aware of that there are a lot of people watching this outside Wisconsin.
Oh, I think it's tremendously important. And you saw it last year when the money started coming in from out of state, when the bodies started coming in from out of state. That's when things around the Capitol escalated. That money and influence has been involved in the recall itself and the protests and the recalls of the state Senate, now the recalls against me. That's why one of the things I hope is, you go back to your previous question, can we move on? I say yes, because I think the people who came in from other states and the money that came in are going to move somewhere else. They're going to go to Ohio or Florida or somewhere else out there. We get back to business here. But I do think it's important. From many standpoints, a special interest in Washington want to win this race because they want to get back to the point where they, and a handful of people like them, control what happens at our state and our local level when it comes to money and power. I believe the taxpayers should be the ones calling the shots, not a handful of big government union leaders. And so that's really what the fight's been about for them. For us, I think it's as simple as courage. I've heard for years, it doesn't matter Democrat, Republican alike, I've heard from people tell me all the time, why, when politicians get in office, why doesn't anybody have the courage to take on the tough issues? Whether it's at the local level, the state level, heck, certainly at the federal level, why don't people have the courage to take these issues on? I don't think anybody, at least who looks at it objectively, could argue that what we did wasn't about taking on tough issues. We tried to think more about the next generation as opposed to just the next election. If I was worried about the next election, I was just doing what was politically expedient, I would have never touched any of these issues out there. But in the end, I wouldn't have fixed it. And to me, I think people elected me to fix things.
Are you hearing from other Republican governors about this as far as their concern about it or their support for yourself? Or
well, interestingly enough, I think this issue is significant, not just for what it means after November, after the elections, not just ours, but the November elections, what it means here in Wisconsin. I think it has an impact across the country, and not just amongst Republican governors. Mm-hmm. You look at Andrew Cuomo in New York State, he's proposing some things very similar to what I proposed. You look at what they signed in Massachusetts with the Democrat governor and Democrat legislature. They did collective bargaining reform for local governments for health care. You look at the Democrat state treasurer in Rhode Island, or even Rahm Emanuel in Chicago, where he's pushing something that reforms the education system, taking on teachers' union. I think the reason why so many national groups are interested in my race and trying to take me out is they want to send a message not just to the Republican governors. I think they want to send it to even some discerning Democrats who are governors and mayors that don't cross with us, or we'll take you out. And I think in the end, again, no matter what your politics, whether you agree or disagree with everything I've done or how I've done it, I think most people, though, still want elected officials to focus more on making tough decisions instead of just worrying about what it means for the next election.
Then go back. Last question, Governor. Go back 15 months. A lot of people who have indicated they support what you've done. Mm-hmm. Some have indicated maybe he should have done it differently. As you look back, how do you evaluate what you've done and how you've done it?
Oh, I think there's no doubt about it. I would concede that as well. Every time in life, even when I was in the private sector, I tried to go back and assess things after I made big decisions. There's no doubt about it. Last January and February, if I had this to do over again, I'd spend more time making the case, building the case, broadening it out as to what the problem was. I mean, I think, for example, if I'd gone around the state and painted the picture that was happening at the time where literally almost every school district in the state had to buy their health insurance from essentially one company, and that cost our schools millions, literally tens of millions of dollars. Or if I told the story about down in Madison where overtime abuses led to a city bus driver making $150,000, I think most people would have said, both those cases, Governor, you need to fix this. My mistake was I just fixed it. I came in and I said, I'm not going to wait, I got to fix it. I fixed it, then I explained it. The reality, I think, why it was so urgent for me to act on it is usually in politics, even more so in Washington, but even in state and local, politicians talk about it, and then they never fix it. So I guess if I had to choose between fixing it and then talking about it, or talking about it and never fixing it, I'll pick fixing it every time. But what I've learned for the future, particularly on other issues, I mean, it's part of the reason why Dr. Tony Evers and I have been working together in public education reform, really built a year-long process to engage stakeholders from across the state to make changes and reforms. We're going to do more of that. We just had an announcement in Milwaukee earlier where we spent since last April working on stakeholders there. We're doing more things here in northeastern Wisconsin. We're going to do things where we have a much more deliberative, transparent process, but we're never going to shy away from making tough decisions because in the end, I want for my kids, my sons Matt and Alex, two kids who go to high school in Wauwatosa public school, and for every other kid like them across the state, I want to make sure they have a better future and a better Wisconsin than we inherited.
So are you saying maybe your style might be a little bit, or your approach to it might be a little bit?
Well, I think just again, we had an urgency. We said, we can't wait. We got to get moving here. I still think it's valuable to tackle tough issues and be aggressive about it. But the style which you invoke more people, you involve the process, you broaden the process. I think we've shown it in education reform and the work that we did with Dr. Evers, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, and a wide group of people. I think you've certainly seen it with some of these other big projects we've been working on. And, even on other issues with economic development, we've been working with private sector unions, which sometimes surprises people, but our battle's not with unions. It was with empowering at the public level, empowering the taxpayers to be in charge. But we're going to work with the operating engineers and other unions out there to build more infrastructure, to do more projects that put people to work. And I think style-wise, people will take a notice.
All right. Thank you, Governor.
Tony, good to be with you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.